Nelson and I are here with a preview, a Gen Con preview for AI Space Puzzle. This is a game that Portal is bringing out. They picked it up some time ago and did some tweaks to it, got it ready for market, and it is going to be hitting Gen Con in just a week or so. We just got a chance to play it. We played it 3 times.
Back to back to back.
Back to back to back. We alternated turns taking the AI role and taking the astronaut's role. That is the idea here. There's going to be this sort of space station that's randomly laid out on the table, and one player or the other players at the table's role is to take the astronauts and try to place them where they're supposed to go. And there's going to be a number of things you can do. That's how it starts off, is like basically just placing the astronauts and getting these keys in the right astronaut's hand. The AI's role is to basically look at the card that has the solution and communicate that. It's just that simple.
It's easy.
It's very easy. No, we can't communicate because we can't use words. The AI can only use tokens to communicate it. And not only that, but you can only use so many tokens. There's this book of scenarios here, just to give you an idea. There's the first scenario. The scenario would tell you how many tokens the AI can use, how many actions the astronaut team can use, and how many rounds you have to solve this. Not to mention, here are a list of the tokens you get to use in this scenario, and the ones that are shaded out you cannot use. So this one's very straightforward and pretty easy. We solved it pretty well, I think. But I am building some sort of communication, which ends up being kind of a garbled AI communication for Nelson to try to figure out, like, what does that mean? What are you trying to communicate with me, David? Because none of these start on the board, and nor are these colored keys up here in those positions. He's got no information, so I'm just kind of trying to tell you, okay, here's where the astronauts are. Here's where the green one is. And some cases you have tokens that have the colors, so that's helpful. We played another scenario where you didn't have the colors.
That made it a lot harder.
That made it a whole lot harder because I had to, and I was doing that one, and I had to try to communicate, okay, well, here's where the keys are. Yep. And then we had to try to figure out, okay, how can we communicate who has those keys? And you use a combination of both this map of the star, or the space station, and this board up here.
Yeah, and the keys, it should be noted, are actual tokens that we could use. So when we couldn't use the colors, we were trying to, get the green in the correct spot on the keyboard and then use that information to then deduce what is going on down here on the ship. And we played through the first 2, and we're like, I think we felt fairly confident in our ability to communicate. So we jumped ahead a couple of difficulties, and we did win. I do want it to be noted that we did win, but it was significantly more challenging. Because one, we weren't able to use this, but then we were also going 9 rounds. And so all the information that David had communicated 4 rounds ago, I was trying to remember, and I was not doing a good job.
That is something that you forget. I mean, to give you an easier sense, if you're a board gamer, this might make more sense to you. It's kind of got a code name sort of vibe. You're trying to communicate something to the other player or players without straight up communicating it. You just have these tokens, and like I said, you can only use so many. So for instance, in one scenario, I was trying to communicate this. And if I had the colored tokens, I could start by saying this. So I've kind of put them in the general position that they are. Now, Nelson might guess incorrectly by putting them there and then there. It's pretty straightforward. He could probably understand that that is the general shape here, but as you can see, it is one off. So not only that, he did 4 things there, and in this scenario, he could only do 3. So there's a lot of interesting things to navigate. Not only what you're trying to get the person to figure out, but like, oh, I thought you were going to be able to do all this stuff.
Yep.
So now I still have to probably communicate this, because if I wait, unless he's able to remember, he might go, oh, wait, where was that red one supposed to go again? Was it down here? Was it over here? Where was it exactly?
And I think one of the things that I appreciated the most in our 3rd game, which was the most challenging game, is as the astronaut side, when I am using, I think I had 3 actions in that one as well, I was trying to use my actions to set David up for more efficient communication back to
Yeah.
me, because there wasn't perfect information. He couldn't say green was in this top row. So I was trying to say maybe green is on this astronaut panel, and I'm going to instead use yellow down here. So maybe we can communicate one of those two things is correct, and then I can deduce later on down the line which one it is and use that to have everything else kind of fall into place. I think we got luckier than we did.
We did get there, and that plays into it. He randomly put some colors up on this board that happened to be in the right space. So I tried to communicate as best I could what was right, what was wrong. In some scenarios, you do get like a little check mark and a little X. I think our first scenario, we didn't get either of these. I can't remember. Or no,
we only got those.
We only got those. There's some other ones that let you say an arrow. So if you wanted to communicate, swap those, or move that one to the left or to the right. But it really becomes tricky because sometimes I'm communicating for what I want him to do down here, and he might be thinking I'm communicating for him to do something up here. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like Nelson said, we needed to take a couple different steps to get the same communication in a later scenario. For instance, we weren't using colors, so once he had these color tokens up here, and I could confirm, okay, this is the correct key. This green character has the key that looks like this. Then I could use the key symbol down here to communicate where it's on the map, so he could relate, okay, that means the green person, and we know that the green person has that particular key, because you have to know where the astronauts are, you have to know which keys the astronauts have, and not only that, in later scenarios that we didn't even play, there are these dice that represent some sort of code that they're each carrying. It's a 6-sided die, effectively, and this card, as you can see, has little dice next to them. Now, not every scenario is going to utilize those. The scenarios will tell you that. But in this case, if we were playing a harder scenario, the green astronaut needed the 6, the blue needed a 2, the white needs a 3, and the red needs a 5. I have to tell you, we did get through the scenarios we played successfully, but not like it wasn't cakewalk. The idea of adding yet just a completely additional variable to it is a little intimidating for sure.
Yeah, and I have played a lot of the crew with a very core group of people, and I think that this game is going to have that same feel where you start to understand how the different people in the group communicate, how you need to communicate to those different people, and what actions they do affect what you need to be doing. So playing 3 times, we started to understand that. It's like, okay, whenever David uses this token, he's probably trying to communicate something that's going on with this lower board here. And so as you're playing through, and there's 40 in the 40 scenarios with
a book of extreme,
which we looked through some of those. Those are intense. And then these are all double-sided. They are, so you can rotate these. You just draw these randomly, think code names. So they're, I would consider infinite replayability.
Well, yeah, not to mention this,
those are all modular.
This gets built out modularly too. And just to give you an idea of the amount of tokens you have to play with, because it's not just limited tokens, but you have all the colors. And again, some of the scenarios will say, this time don't use the colors. You have all of those keys, the 4 keys. You have these icons, which is something we haven't talked about yet. But these icons correlate with a lot of the icons that are out here. And it was interesting, after a couple of games, we were talking about how we interpreted these things. And I said, well, like for instance, if I had this going on, it would mean the green astronaut is on the space that has just that icon. Whereas Nelson was thinking that might mean the green astronaut is on one of the spaces that has that icon. But you could communicate something like this to say the green is on the one with these 3, which you can basically narrow down to one specific tile.
Right.
However, in doing so, I've used 4 tiles. That is a lot of tiles to use in order to communicate one very specific thing. And this is where kind of the deduction comes in. I do want to make a correction. In our preview for Gen Con, we talked about this being a deduction game, and I wanted to retract that a little bit. There is deduction, because I think this example that I'm getting at right here, you can get to a point where you're like, okay, I gave you that one piece of information, but hopefully that was enough for you to deduce a couple other pieces of information. And that will definitely be the case. But this is more a game about limited communication and like basically injecting some challenge in between people trying to communicate with one another. And I think it does a really interesting job of that. It's very visual. it is one of those things where it's going to cause some conversations at the table
Yeah.
where you like after like they'll say, "What did you mean on the third round where you did this?" And you say, and they're like, "What?" Like that's insane.
Yeah.
Because there was a couple times when we were playing when I was like, "Do this," and he did something completely different, and I effectively just reversed that in my next clue to try to communicate, if nothing else.
That was wrong.
That was wrong. Switch that back.
Yeah, he pulled back the cover. I was like, I'm starting to think what I did last time was incorrect.
It was very, very funny.
But even in that communication, I understood what you were getting at last round as well. So I was able to then use that information going forward.
Yeah, it's
So
a really, really
clever.
interesting,
Yeah.
clever game. We've only played it with 2 players. I do think this would be interesting and a different experience. At 2 players, it was a very quiet game.
Yeah.
You know, I was quietly building my thing, and then I would reveal my clue, and then he would very quietly try to interpret that. I think with, say, 4 players, the 3 people who are on the astronaut side, there's going to be more conversation and more table talk where you might go, "Oh, I bet he means this. Oh, no, I know, David. He probably means this." What's interesting is I have to sit there and just kind of like not acknowledge anything that's being said. And there are some rules. You're not supposed to like, the astronauts can't say to the AI, "Hey, when you use a check mark, use it to mean this."
Yeah.
So there is some interesting sort of things you need to navigate with the communication and the table talk, but it is a challenging game because of it.
It definitely is. And you were saying it would be really fun with a lot more players to be that person, to be the AI and sit behind the screen. And that's one of my favorite things. It triggered my memory of Mysterium. Because one of those, my favorite things in Mysterium, playing as kind of the ghost, is trying to listen to them as how are they interpreting the clues, and you're just like, no, that's not right.
But
How am I going to fix this?
But then maybe adjusting a little bit
Then maybe
because you're
adjusting
like,
a little bit because of
okay,
that. Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
agree with what they're thinking, but I guess I'll join them and try to let them interpret it the way they want.
Absolutely, yeah.
One thing I do want to point out is really simplistic components. I think Portal did some nice jobs. I think they updated some of the meeples and some of the dice and things like that from the original version of the game, which wasn't available here in the States. This board right here, it's dual layered, but unless you put it up in these little like holders that they have, that helps a little bit. If you lay it flat on the table, it kind of slides around a little bit. It is nice that they have the production there, but it can be a little fiddly and awkward on the table. I would just say use a gentle touch when you're moving tokens around on this thing because it could get a little sloppy otherwise.
Yeah.
But that is AI Space Puzzle. If you have any questions at all about it, please make them in the comments below. This could be a good game. If you could do one of those games where you like have a clue on YouTube and then the audience tries to guess. I don't know that we're going to try to tackle that, but
That'd
it
be
does
fun, though.
strike me as the
Yeah.
kind of thing that we might be able to do.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Also, if you're at Gen Con, go over to the Portal booth and check it out. Maybe pick it up if you're interested in it. And if you see us, say hi. We'll be at Gen Con. That's what we do. We
what we
live
do.
here anyway. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.